Hey everybody, happy Monday. I'm gonna get the guys on the line here. Let's see. We'll just call all of them. We'll just call all of them. It's kind of fun. Oh. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. We are live.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Oh. I'm gonna mute myself while I blow my nose and eat a granola bar.
Okay. I will keep you off. I'll keep you off camera so no one sees you blowing your nose. Ew, it's so gross. Ah, don't show it to me. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you, Justin, for the raid. Getting all that politics energy in from his politics stream. Hey, everybody. Bit.ly/wavewatch, I think, is the way to get tickets to his shoe. Is that Justin?
Sup, fam?
Oh, Nikes. It's Justin Robert Young.
Yeah.
I'm not getting video from you, pimp.
Oh, hold on.
You check your.
Oh, I got you.
Oh, there,
I got you.
There he is. We're hiding Andrew so he can eat in peace.
I see him. Can't hide anything from me.
How's politics? How are the politics doing, Justin?
Man, you know, it is fast and furious. We got we got a lot going on and not a lot of time to get to it, but this is probably the silliest of moments in the political calendar because nobody knows anything, and yet everybody's yelling the loudest that they're going to because this is the last moment you have to kind of change people's minds or activate those that might otherwise not be activatable.
Yeah. Did you do any early voting? Or are you gonna vote Tuesday?
Oh no, I dig the ritual. I like going to see. I like talking to the old ladies. I like that whole. That's my jam. I like the dirt under my fingernails.
I went and early voted last week on Thursday, and oh hey Brian, he's getting settled still. And it was like the middle of the day on Thursday, and it was still like a good 30-minute wait.
Oh, jeez.
And with like 8 machines going. Hey, Brian.
Hi. Sorry, I'm eating celery.
You good?
I meant to early vote today, and then I found out that early voting is like a window.
Yep.
Like you can vote early, but not but not late early. Yeah, which is like why would they do that? What is the benefit to that? Disenfranchisement.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because in
they
Texas
shut down
it ended
early voting 4 days before, which
It ended
I
on
guess
Friday.
you're right. You wouldn't be able to vote in the weekend.
on the weekend, right?
Jesus. All right.
It's funny. We actually talked a little bit about this on the bonus episode I just did, but I think part of it is just voting is a government run thing, right? And
On the state level.
it involves a lot of people that don't get paid a lot of money to do it. So you have to budget it out and plan it out many times years in advance, and sometimes those plans aren't great, and there's not a lot of oversight, and not a lot of people are like, then like if we voted on how we were going to vote next time on the current ballot, I feel like we'd probably get a more representative set of rules than the way that we do it now. If we just like, hey, on the ballot, here's what we're going to do now forever. Like, or if you need to change it, we'll vote about it the next time. I think we would get a better system.
Alrighty, let me see. Let me check out stuff here. Hang on a Gmail. Hey, Andrew. Oh, he's good. One last call.
Oh, Eric Geller subbed. That's great.
Oh,
Subs over dubs.
Geller's great. Geller is one of my favorite. If you are not reading Eric Geller's writing at Politico, please go do it. He is one of my favorite writers on cybersecurity.
I am ashamed to admit that I consume almost everything I consume of his is over Twitter, and my guess is I know I certainly wouldn't call Twitter the primary thing that I want to be known for. So I'm going to guess that he's got really good stuff on Politico.
Well, I mean, most of his stuff on Twitter is just horrid puns, or like references to animated Star Trek or Star Wars shows. So other than that, he's a tremendous human being and a fantastic reporter.
Oh my God.
Thank you, Eric.
Can I tell you how great it feels to be with you guys and to know that I don't have to travel or host anyone? Well, actually, there's one person I'm hosting tomorrow. But then after that, it gets to be
I
normal.
hope they're not listening.
No, I'm really excited to have a rhythm and a 2-month plan here.
Oh my
got a
God, dude!
plan?
I'm just at the
Love
end.
to see the plan.
Ish. Hey, we got bullet points.
Bad time to tell Brian about the surprise Austin weird things. Beat up.
Oh, that would be fun.
This is how you get yourself in trouble.
We checked with zoning. We think we can put about 60 people at your place.
I think we can do even better.
Probably
Hey,
a little more than that,
hey,
yeah.
by the way, so I talked to somebody. This is this is how crazy the vision is getting. I talked to the guy who designed all of the architecture and the theme of Wizard Academy, and guess what he's into right now? Like as a hobby, as an architect, like what he really wants to do is design a bunch
Hans?
of glamping tents.
Oh, jeez.
So, which, by the way, period, new sentence. Hey, did you know that by being in the watershed, we can only develop over 20% of the land, and permitting might be a problem for anything more, unless they were temporary structures. End of sentence.
There we go.
Okay.
Do cargo containers count as temporary structures?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we looked into just there's a company that will, for a fairly reasonable fee, like basically they just pull 3 semis in, and you've got, 1,500 square feet of office space and a shipping container to store all your stuff in, and they rise it up so it's the same level, so you can assemble pallets on there, and then just have them picked up and go.
Nice.
Also, I'm pretty sure the thing that we're doing this year, if anyone's paid attention to scam stuff, there seems to be a thing that we do every year. And the thing we're doing this year, I think, is it's the first time that from the ground up we wanted to build it to be valued outside of our bubble. Like, you could never have heard of Scam School or Brian Brushwood or anything, and somebody could hand it to you, and you're like, this is awesome.
Like what? I don't get it. What do you do?
You are so lucky I don't have my backpack here, or I would immediately
No.
deeply
I'm just
upset
being
David
a-
Rowan by pulling out the prototype and showing it to you right now.
That's what I'm egging you on.
No, I'm really excited.
All right. I think I'm good on my end. Andrew, how are you feeling, Mr. Main? Got a thumbs up? Brian, Justin?
Yeah. You know what? I
Go do the thing that you need to spend.
Well,
to,
turn on
to-
the
I turned the AC down a little bit, but I didn't seem to do much of
normally
anything.
I'm ahead of that, but I wasn't today. And also, like, I tried to balance out. This room gets like way colder than the rest of the upstairs, to the consternation of my children. So I kind of half closed those vents.
Oh.
So it takes a little longer for this to get cold now.
Here you go.
All right, ready.
All right, then, Andrew, feel free to take it away in... Ooh,
I have that lingering sneeze.
get it out.
Let's just go for it. Let's just go for
Look
it.
at the
No
light.
way, no
Look
way!
at
You're,
the light.
court-
Look
you're,
at the
you're
light.
courting disaster. Wait, you're a madman.
Okay, all right then. We're walking the tightrope in 3, 2.
Hello and welcome to the Weird Things podcast. I'm Adrian Main, joined by Brian Brushwood,
Hello, you beautiful people.
Justin Robert Young,
Well, hello, friends.
and our producer, Mr. Awesome himself, Bryce Castillo.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bryce, Mr. Awesome Castillo.
Yeah, he loves it when you call him that. By the way, you're like, oh my God, it's Mr. Awesome.
It's a good name. It's a good nickname. It's like a generic, what is it, Fantastic Four.
Well,
guy.
and of course, my code
I'm
name
Mr.
is Dr. Bee's Knees.
Not like James Flame or something. Like
no,
You don't want
no.
to be on. Okay.
And I'm kid. Okay.
Gentlemen, we had a discussion right before the show about glamping tents, things like this, and I have an idea.
Yeah. Is it that you want to glamp in a tent?
Yeah, I don't quite fully know what it means, but I'm sure.
Glamping is basically like you're camping, but it's like high-end luxury. You got heaters, space heaters, and air conditioners, and your own toilet, and
You know the joke about going out camping, but then there's like a TV there? That's pretty much glamping.
Yeah,
It's like a spa day.
See, that's the thing is that's what I've just understood as camping. Like I'm if I'm going out into the world, like I don't know a world in which I'm not bringing my laptop and I'm trying to bring many of the comforts of the modern world out into nature.
Well, and so now there's finally a word for it. You've always been glamping. Now there's a word for it.
True story. When I was in the Boy Scouts, we went on a camping trip, and for me, I'm kind of a nocturnal person, right? So the idea of 2 hours after lights out, the sun's down, being in our tent and doing whatever, didn't sound appealing to me. And I asked my scoutmaster, like, are we allowed to build our own tent? He's like, yeah, you can build your own tent. I'm like, okay. So I brought some tarps and stuff, and I brought a little more stuff than maybe the other scouts brought.
Nice.
And and I built my own little tent. And imagine the point of view from my scoutmaster. He's walking along. It's very quiet. The fire's down, just the tents, maybe some flashlights. And he sees this blue glow coming from one tent. And I hear this, on the fabric. Andrew, what's that? And he opens up, and there I am watching my TV. Right now, this is when I'm a teenager. I'm like 14, so this TV meant like a kind of like a 1 foot by 1 foot cube black and white battery operated TV, and I'm sitting there just watching TV. It's like this isn't what camping's about. I'm like, it's portable. He's like, no, and he looks in there, and I've got one of these like refrigerated coolers where I'm like drinking a soda out of. It's like no, you're like. Coming with me.
And you're like, you're right. I thought it was overkill. I should have just used the fountain soda dispenser.
So he made me spend the rest of the night sitting on the floor of his tent. He was a very good scoutmaster, but he lived with his mom, and there was sort of this question about him. So I spent the night in the corner, kind of frightened. Nothing happened. But it was a very interesting experience. Whereas maybe scouts and me weren't meant to be together.
Hey, yeah, I'm not down with this. I don't know. For anybody who does like to rough it and they like to have the thing and be one with nature, or whatever, like that's fine. I always found that to be a little bit artificial. Like nature really wants to kill you. Like I have no interest in just laying in the jaws of a lion and acting like me and the lion are super cool. He's just sleepy.
Great place to visit. Wouldn't want to live there.
Yeah.
On the subject of camping or experimental camping, what if we decided to do some research, like build our own self-contained enclosed environment, seal it off, put some plants in there for some oxygen, and basically build our own little mini contained ecosystem, like a biodome, but a small scale, one man one.
Okay. Did we ever talk? We must have talked about this in the past. Did you guys ever visit Biosphere 2, the ill-fated scientific research place? My brother and I, when I graduated high school, I was like, I want to go on a trip to the West Coast to go visit my aunt and uncle and cousins. And my brother, being, I think he was entering his junior year of high school. So we just drove out, and then we saw, and this is, again, pre-internet. Like, I had only read in magazines about Biosphere 2, this completely enclosed, encapsulated attempt to take all 7 or 8 ecosystems and represent them or whatever. And the brave scientists who were going to try to survive on their own fertilizer. And as we're driving out there, we see next exit Biosphere 2. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I told my brother all about it. And he was like, yeah. And so we spent, I think it was about $100 we didn't have to go on the full tour and do everything. And at the time, it ended up being an ill-fated experiment and sort of the salvaged remains of it are, well, we learned a lot about how hard it is to do this kind of thing for when we go to Mars. But at the time, it was hard not to get swept up into this sense of visionary. It was like there's what Epcot became, and there's what Walt Disney intended Epcot to be, right? And Epcot ended up being fine, but he had a very different vision. And it was like we got to glimpse that original vision of Biosphere 2. It was crazy.
I remember when they first did it, and the participants, had like these space shuttle like uniforms as they went inside of Biosphere 2. And to their credit, it was like a legit, like, we're really going to seal ourselves off as long as we possibly can and try to see how it works. There was a lot of politics, and a lot of like infighting, whatever, among the whole plan, whatever. Yeah, they look like the people from the TV show V, where the aliens, came to Earth to eat
those
people.
are the V costumes.
Yes. But it was, it was a very interesting idea. I would say that my criticism was, and this is just retrospect looking at, they had a couple, I think, what I were kind of flawed premises, and one of them was they way overestimated the how much CO2 the plants could absorb, and that was the problem they had, was continuing oxygen depletion. And there were other, there were things that seemed like, man, it would have been neat to try this for like a few days at a time and build up and then try to then go through. But it seemed like they had this whole theory, this is how it'll work. And it didn't work. There were a lot of problems there, and then it sort of fell apart.
Well, if we want to put a charitable shine on everything, we've talked about in After Things how highly competitive artistic markets, a lot of people enter the fray and fail, and each of their failures subsidizes the ultimate success. Yes, they totally failed at their mission of figuring out a sustainable, model for a space arc or whatever, but their failure subsidized a lot of things. I suspect that for many years to come, it's good to know what is harder than you think. And I thank you for your service, Biosphere 2, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I would say yes, but I would say there are people who told them at the beginning, this is the problem, and maybe stage it. Like, fail often, not fail once and then be done. And that would be my crit, would be like, hey, there are people who are telling you this would be the problem. You're like, no, we got this. And like, hey, turned out the exact thing that people said was going to happen happened. And I think building, and I agree, I love the fact they're ambitious to try this. I love that, but I think it's sort of this, account for this, and maybe you could have made it more sustained. Easy for me to be like armchair, we should have done this, but that was what people said, like, your auction, this is not going to work, it's not going to work, and then it didn't work, and then we lost an opportunity to be like, there are a lot of, we did learn some stuff, but could have learned a lot more.
I think that might be the indictment, is that we yes, if we gained all that from one big failure, right? Like, how much more could we have gained if we had just a lot of little failures or tweaks along the way that as you stage up to people going there full time?
Well, in my just a little button on this. Again, I want to be charitable because I'm a fan of people who want to do crazy things. In some alternate universe, Epcot, because Epcot, I think also, as it was originally envisioned, was doomed to failure. But instead, they figured out, oh, wait, no, we're just going to be an attraction. Like, I can imagine a sideways universe where Biosphere Fever took over and they had roller coasters, and it was the raddest place to come watch people in a bubble or to contemplate that pro-science minded experiment. And again, I commend them for their attempt.
I want more of these. I want more of these attempts. And hey, somebody heard me. What is this? Curtis Bowd decided he was going to do a one-man biosphere. He was going to close himself inside of his own. And this was to raise awareness about climate change. I'm not sure what the overall thing he was trying to make aware of, but he decided, hey, I'm going to seal myself inside on his, like, I guess his brother and sister-in-law's farm. He put himself inside this clear plastic tent with a lot of plants and stuff. And the goal is just, I guess, to go 3 days or so in a realistically self-contained system. There was like double wall chambers. I think he used like positive air pressure or whatever to do this. Somebody in the comments says, I believe a scientist just attempted something like this. So you can read the coverage of when he decided to go do this, and it's like, oh, it's cool. It's kind of a neat experiment. He made it 15 hours.
Wait,
then
before it became like super dangerous?
Yeah. He 14 hours in the 10 by 10 cube, he had to stop because the CO2 meter said, hey, guess what? These plants that you're counting on to replenish your oxygen supply, not enough. Not enough.
Wow.
Mm.
But the thing is, like, he spent the time in there to show how greenhouse gases are suffocating the earth. He was the only person producing them.
Well, yes, but so does that? So I would imagine his point would be, yeah, and I proved it. It's really a problem. When
Nailed it.
there are too many
CO2
greenhouse gases.
interferes with respiration. I'm glad we ignored 100 years of research on that to decide that this is a new discovery.
Oh my god, this picture just tickled me. He's just so excited. He's so thrilled. He's very, oh no, that doesn't look as exciting. Is that a before and after photo? Like, that's
before and
he went
during, it looks like.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh no, I think I screwed up."
Well, so I mean, if I'm reading your take, Andrew, is that there's a bit of an eye rolling, well, duh, to this, and yet, we genuinely have a bit of an academic crisis happening right now in that that we're having problems with reproducibility of academic experiments, right? Mm-hmm. And so even if the answer is, well, duh, I kind of want to high five this dude too for proving the obvious again.
I spent several days doing rebreather training, right? Learning, how to use a rebreather, how to, basically how do you recycle your own oxygen, all this sort of stuff. And the math is pretty simple. And then you look at plants, things like this. And I guess my thing is like, yeah, I think these things are cool, but it's like, dude, you could have done the math and you would have known, there was not a lot of scientific rigor. My problem is that, and I would like to see more of these. I would like to see more of these experiments because I think if we want to live on Mars and other places, we got to figure this out. But, the people who are kind of jumping in and saying, well, I don't need to do the math or the science because that really matter because I'm trying to make a point. It's like, you're not maybe doing as much as, again, he doesn't care about, as far as I know, colonization of the planet. It's probably against, I don't know. My point is, it's like, do a little research, do a little science, listen to some experts on this, start from there. Don't decide you need to reinvent everything. Maybe it would have been successful because it would have been cool. It would have been really neat to see if this guy maybe had to be twice the volume because trying to live off purely oxygen alone in such a small environment, I'm not aware of. There's some NASA research. I'm not aware of it's been. I would love to see this, but I'm like, if you just decide, man, textbooks, things like this, I don't need that. I'm making a point. It's like, well, probably gonna fail. But
well, I mean, but at a certain point, where does it go from I'm trying to do a public scientific demonstration to this is jackass, like where it's like, and to me, look, I love both. Like, get you a man who can do both, but like at the same time. It does kind of have to be one or the other. Either it's like I'm going to try to do this thing that is hard to do, if not impossible, or I'm going to try and to the best of every possible ability figure out where I am scientifically to push forward, use my own human ingenuity to push forward on something that we already know.
Yeah, what's funny is I want even more weekend people to have failed experiments just like this, assuming nobody ever gets hurt. But I think you could make a case that he gobbled up a lot of the media attention oxygen, and as a result, it's harder for somebody who intends to do a more rigorous, in serious approach to this, to get the same attention that he did.
I think everybody should be free to do whatever you want, call whatever you want, and do that. But if your long-term goal, and that was one of the criticisms against the biosphere, you call it Biodome like the movie, but biosphere too, was that it made it much harder to get research or funding for this because, and again, it's like, that's the world we live in. I did something, I failed, and we should be free to fail. We absolutely need to be free to fail and all that. But because that failed in a way that it did, and maybe somebody else could have a much better chance of succeeding, it's harder to get funding for it. And just a thing to be mindful is like, all right, have I covered my bases? But I am talking to a guy who does make a large part of his living doing the show, doing very stupid stuff. So
Well, and plus, I think Beef Viper has the right of what I'm trying to discover in myself as I extrovert through this. Beef Viper writes, "Hey man, without the math, it's just performance art." To which my magician brain thinks, "Yeah, I'm okay with that too. like I'm cool with all sides of this. Do the math, get it right, have it work, have it not work. Great, science. Also, do no math. It's performance art. Fan of that too."
And let's not say
Bryce-
let's not say he didn't do no math. Like this I don't know.
Bryce, you're correct.
Right.
When I heard it was the size of the chamber and I heard he was planning to do this, I was surprised because of what I as a performance artist and not a scientist know about CO2 absorption up. I'm like, that doesn't sound like, I'm like, how long? That doesn't sound sustainable, and then,
Well, and
so I'm like, this guy's got a science channel. Just like, I assume he knows more than I do.
yeah.
So-
Well, and to sort of round up the story, I think he only was trying to survive in here like 24 hours, and he was not expecting the overcast weather to affect.
I think he was trying to go for 3 days, but yeah,
Is-
I think
oh.
there's, a lot of,
well, yeah.
I would love for him to go do this again with a bigger, with better CO2 absorbing plants, things like this. I would love to see him try this again and try to beat what he did. I would be very enthusiastic, and if he can find a way to make this work, I will be championing. Hey, look, this is really cool what he did.
I think, look, and it seemed like it's something that he really wanted to make a big deal about, and obviously made a big enough deal that we're talking about it here on the show. But yeah, look, this is the beautiful era that we are in, where there is no, you don't have to wait for like Brian mentioned that like the media coverage came and now it might not come for another thing. In this day and age, look, to do it on YouTube, to do it on Twitter, to do it on Facebook is its own reward. And it is something that can connect you with an audience that would otherwise find you. And there is no judgment. There's no gatekeeper to say, well, wait, another weirdo in a clear tent. We just covered that. We just spilled our ink on that one last week. That's definitely a newspaper term.
You know what else
It's our
is not-
policy. No weirdo and biodome stories. Haven't you read it?
Yeah, listen.
No, don't bring that story to me. We already covered it. See, I speak in rhymes.
All right, listen up, kids. It's time for our staff meeting. I know it's the mid-20th century, but the good news is we have a total monopoly on how people get their information. It's not like in the future anybody can be an independent creator. I mean, what are they going to do? How are they going to sell the ads that we sell? Ha ha!
I know. We're trying to sell advertisements to dance marathons. That's the way that this business keeps afloat. Not like there's a website called patreon.com/weirdthings where independent creators can continue to make sure that they make a living by way of the donations directly from their audience.
Oh,
See?
man.
Yeah.
Well, you see, here's the thing, kid. Even if that did exist, I'll bet once a month as everybody gets collected and some of the credit cards are declined, there'll be a huge dip. It's unsustainable. The only way it could possibly be sustained is if people were to take a moment and double-check their pledges and make sure that they were able to get us enough money. I mean, get whoever would use this service that doesn't exist 30 or 50 years from now, the money.
50, only 50 years.
So 70, 80 years from now.
Over 100.
Hey, listen up, Newsy. Get back on the streets. Sell
Ah!
those newspapers.
Yeah, see, and by the way, if maybe this site in the future, see, maybe switch their processing partner to one in old foggy London town, see, and maybe you need to make sure that it doesn't get rejected as a foreign transaction. So please work with your credit card or bank to make sure that your pledge went through, see? Yeah,
but
theoretically.
luckily we'll never have to worry about this because we're newspapers. We'll be here forever.
We turn into bats.
Patreon.com/weirdthings.
Please help us.
Is
If you
the
want to see us do our own
secret-
biodome experiment and sealing Bryce inside of a plastic chamber,
Yes. Bryce, how long do you think you could go in the biodome?
How long could I survive in a biodome?
Yeah, and listen, we're loading all the anime you want. Don't worry.
I could probably last a while. I don't eat too much. I think I could probably last maybe a week.
Week and a half, maybe.
Maybe a week.
Week. like a month or something,
Like a week or a week and a half.
like a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. I don't know. The problem with trying to talk Bryce into going into a biodome is he better be able to switch the show. Like we can't really, as funny as it would be to put Bryce in a biodome, he still actually needs to shoot and edit everything.
Do all
So
the
I
work.
guess you and Jason, Brian, you'd have to go and shoot Modern Rogue in his biodome.
The good news is I think the podcast would be unaffected, right? Because we're already planning where the switching station is and where the sets are going to be set up. So we'll just.
But
make
that's
sure
also
it's-
not in a bio. That's not in a bio.
What if we put Bryce, like, there's a John Travolta movie, The Boy in the Plastic Bubble. What if we put him inside of like that spacesuit thing? We give him a tube that connects to the biodome.
Well, oh yeah. So,
So,
here's
wait,
what I'm picturing:
this
is there's two biodomes. Okay, there's one in the studio, but then there's like a doggy door that goes.
What? I can't have a human door?
There's like that's where you can get your sunshine and your oxygen from the
Yeah.
plants and play.
Exactly.
So one of
frolic.
them is not even outside.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
you
it's
got to be
not.
able to come in and switch, though, right?
Yeah.
I might as
And
well
also,
do that.
I mean,
outside.
listen, Bryce, it's going to be a very quick 2-3 months.
Yeah, the following 6 months after that will go really fast because the first 2 or 3 months will be the most stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But once
And
you-
then when
once
we
you-
make it a permanent position,
But I want
So
I want a
what I want
human-sized
everybody to
door,
do
damn
is-
it.
okay, fine.
Tune in New Year's Day as Bryce enters his 2019 biodome, for which he will stay in the entire calendar year.
Tony
the
be
Bryce
prisoner.
in the plastic bubble.
Yeah, Tony B. Casty. The B stands for biodome.
Oh, jeez.
Do you ever see that John Travolta movie?
What?
Boy in the bubble.
Tony B.
Boy in the
Casting?
Plastic Bubble. Yeah.
No, but I saw what was they remade it?
Oh no! I think you're thinking
Or-
of the comedy Bubble Boy from the late '90s.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah. No. The Boy in the Plastic Bubble was, I believe it was David, the Bubble Boy. He had a severe autoimmune disease and could never be let out of his bubble. And they thought that he was well enough to get out of the bubble, and he wasn't. And it's very sad. Although I remember at that time watching on Nickelodeon, I think they ran a show called "What Will They Think of Next" or something, and basically they had made a literal spacesuit for kids who have similar autoimmune diseases that they could walk outside.
Did they just like soft remake this as like a YA, another like YA thing? I think I remember seeing a commercial or trailer for I'm sure it was an adaptation of a YA book or whatever, but it was like a girl. She doesn't have a bubble. They ditched the bubble.
Oh, the one with like Patrick Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, where it's like a cute boy next door falls in love via like text message and emails with the girl next door who can never leave her house. And
I
then
think she had a sun allergy or something, like a photo.
something like that. Yeah, where it's like she can't leave, and then she leaves, and I don't know. In the trailer, everything starts going wrong. But it seemed like one of them like this if you cry every time kind of stories.
Yeah, it's sad. Autoimmune disease kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Segue from that, guys.
Goblins. How are they doing?
Yeah.
Well, goblins could be one possible explanation to the next interesting thing I have to talk. Presumably interesting. I don't want to tell you what you can find
I don't want to
interesting, but
oversell it.
just when you think like a story's done and the weirdness has been explained away, somebody else comes along and goes, aha, but there is more weirdness. Remember Oumuamua?
Oh man, for a second I thought you were gonna.
Jeez.
Wait, I don't. What is it?
No, come on, Brian. Like, yeah, that was your favorite thing.
I know. I mean, I thought Tub Thumping was good, but I don't remember any other songs.
No,
Justin, set him straight. Just set him
I mean,
straight.
geez, I never. Well, Brian, you can get it, right? Like, so just tell us what your first thought with Oumuamua was.
I already made my Chumbawamba joke. I got nothing left in
all
the.
right. But just all right. So then, sure, go ahead.
These times we live in, when some strange interstellar object comes into our solar system, and we
I
just
know,
sort of go,
and immediately starts threatening the Thundercats.
No, that's different. Remember that object that we're like, what is this? What is this thing?
Oh yeah, no, the thing that
space
looks a
dookie.
little bit like a
Mr. Hanky
space
there.
Space dookie.
object.
Yeah.
So this object, appeared and saw in our solar system, and we decided this thing probably came from another solar system, whatever, and it had what may have been some interesting, behaviors as far as in relation to to like a Keplerian orbit or how it was sort of behaving. And there was this initial speculation like, hey, this could be a space probe. This could be a space probe. I'm like, no, that's stupid. We live in the real world, where there's only one planet with life in the trillions of star systems in our universe,
Yeah.
Stop this with your rational thinking. Anyhow, I mean, it is kind of absurd. But anyhow, there was that speculation of like, oh, maybe it's, this and that. And they're like, no, it's not. And, we kind of got, some better telemetry of it and this and that. And so we kind of said, it's probably like a comet or something, whatever, without a tail, whatever. And it just seemed like we had a good rational explanation for it. Well, some researchers said, there is this question of, it seemed like it had an unusual acceleration profile. And so Shmuel Biley and Abraham Loeb, the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, published a paper, and it's available in arXiv right now. And they say this is the first object of interstellar origin observed in the solar system, and that the Oumuamua showed deviations from a Keplerian orbit at a high statistical significance, meaning that it behaved a little bit unusual, something that sounds like maybe outside of what we would expect. The observed trajectory is best explained by an excess radial acceleration, and there's a formula there. So basically what they're saying is that you get into the sort of we explore the possibility excess acceleration results from solar radiation pressure. Basically, they say they think it could have hit a solar sail, that the thing could be a probe with a solar sail.
What? I mean, I guess the right phrase is non-zero possibility, right?
Non-zero.
We are seeing something that is consistent. If this is that object, these are, oh my goodness, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That's astonishing.
So wait, are they watching us right now?
Could be.
What's going on, man? Hey, what's up, guys?
Yo.
It's me, your boy, Justin Robert Young.
Yeah.
You want to sub to my Twitch channel?
Hey, listen, I was always for you guys.
Just let it be known who talked directly to you first.
That was Brian making fun of those V uniforms, those biosphere people. We thought they were cool.
Oh my God, Brian kept making fun of your name, saying that you were Chumbawamba. It was great.
Man,
Yeah,
I guess
fact: gingers taste the best. It's the rest of us are poison.
This is one of those because it's going to pass through the solar system and we're not going to have a chance to know what's what. I mean, unless it, slides into our global DMs and gets into our orbit.
There is that there's been a change, the change in orbit. What? In every science fiction movie, that's a thing. So these are credible, as far as I know, people making let's not throw out the possibility that
this is some kind of probe.
This is the Fermi paradox, where it's okay, if life is so likely in the universe, how come we ain't seen none? And at some point, if there is life in the universe everywhere, and theoretically, as Michio Kaku described, what was it, a Type 3 civilization, they probably would have the resources to just fling out a bunch of probes and just be all it's going to take a really long time to get this data, but, we have transcended time and space and have a boundless economy and harvest all the energy from stars, so let's get started.
So they write, yet despite its close solar approach, 0.25 AU, which is a quarter of the distance to the Earth and the Sun, Oumuamua shows no sign of any cometary activity, no cometary tail, nor gas emissions absorption lines were observed. From a theoretical point of view, has shown that if another paper, if outgassing is sponsored acceleration as originally proposed, then the associated outgassing torque would have driven a rapid evolution in Oumuamua's spin, which is incompatible with observation. They're saying that hey, we said this thing goes, it's a comet, but it's not doing comet stuff. It's not doing what comets are supposed to do.
So I guess this is how if and when we ever really confirm alien life, this might be the kind of thing that it looks like, where, we get a story, we roll our eyes, we get another story, we raise an eyebrow, get another story, and then and my guess is, even if we got enough data to say like, no, this is the single most anomalous thing we've ever seen enter our solar system ever. Also, it'll be gone and we can't catch it. Then all of a sudden, 5 years, we start, setting up more and more telescopes and satellites to try to catch the next one of these that we hope we see at some point. And then it becomes a very like, it could be the kind of thing where we get whatever we get from this bypass or flyby, and then 50 years, a whole generation grows up knowing, there's definitely aliens out there. There's this one thing that we saw, and hopefully we'll have another chance to see another one.
Yeah, it was a great book, and actually ended up being a series. Arthur C. Clarke, Rendezvous with Rama.
Oh, I started that one, but never finished it. I'm a bad person.
You are a bad person. That dealt with, we see this thing in the outer edges of the solar system, and it's a comet. It's this. It's just like, wait, no, it seems to be intelligent, and it's coming into, basically, it was this alien space probe that was passing through our solar system, and then heading on outwards. And we realized we had this short amount of time to interact with it before it was going to be departing. And it seemed like kind of a very realistic idea of what it could be like, and it's not an invasion story. It's just this, story of kind of encountering. Well, I don't want to get into details, but it's a different take on.
And I guess that's one of the weird things is somebody asked, you go on these long drives and you start just, conjecturing about stuff. And somebody said, hey, why would it matter? What would change my life if we knew for a fact that, we had proof of alien civilizations? And the answer, I said, your epiphany would be exactly like a religious awakening, in that it would have tremendous meaning and not change the fact that you are supposed to be at work at 9 a.m. the next day. And so like for an entire generation, people would just grow up like, I guess that's a thing. And then they continue to do exactly what they do.
Now, to show you kind of the precedence of just the object itself for getting this, the claim, this rather outrageous claim, but fascinating. As the first known object of its type, Oumuamua presented a unique case for the International Astronomical Union, which killed Pluto, by the way, which assigns designations for astronomical objects. Originally classified as Comet C/2017U1, it was later reclassified as Asteroid A2017U1 due to the absence of a coma. They first said, it's a comet. Wait, there's no coma, so it's got to be an asteroid. Once it was unambiguously identified as coming from outside the solar system, a new designation was created, I, for interstellar object. So it went from C to A. Now it's I2017U1, I presume. So,
hey, while we're talking about all those space telescopes out there, we'll pour one out for the inspiration of the name of the world's most boring dog. Kepler satellite finally gave up operations. Thank you for your contribution.
Well, I think would be lovely to have more. And you know who wants more? More stuff in space, more people in space, who sees 1 trillion people living and working in space. It's Jeff Bezos.
Yes. Oh, really?
So we've mentioned this before, and he was recently given a forum to talk a bit more about his space ambitions, and that's one of the things he really talked about, is the idea of 1 trillion people living and working in space. And I can't underscore that when you have the guy who is the richest man in the world heading up the second largest publicly traded company in the world that's still growing, and this is something that he's spending, it's not, hey, I thought it would be cool that he's spending $1 billion+ a year on this effort. NASA's entire budget, something like $17 to $20 billion. So you have a guy that now is privately committing about 5% of that budget towards one goal. NASA's human space exploration budget's like 10. I mean, there's a guy that's contributing about 10% of his, 10%, towards one specific cause, and perhaps slightly more efficiently in its own way. I think it's a little more than, hey, this, some interesting person said something kind of, it's like, that's the bold vision from a guy who has proved himself.
Man, I don't want to get too heady on it, but it's like it's almost as though Jeff Bezos has been. Let me put it this way: he seems to be acting as though he's trying to think of all of humanity as a single organism, and everybody is a cell. And by efficiently getting all the cells the nutrients they need in terms of food and technology and even art and so on. And now he's figuring out the body of humanity now needs to bust out of this petri dish. And so that's the next thing we got to do now that we get more and more efficient so that we don't choke ourselves out on this planet.
Well, I think also it's just the we're living in a very extraordinary time where all things are kind of possible in a level that I don't think that they felt like they were possible in years past. And the current crop, criticize and defame them as we are wont to do. The current crop of are kind of captains of industry, like the issues that they want to solve on their off time are about as ambitious as you could possibly think. And certainly we can say, oh, well, why don't you solve something else like, world hunger or something like that? But this is what they want to do. And I don't know. I mean, I don't think, can you get more ambitious than we need to become a multi-planet species?
And I'm going to just reinforce the idea that the more space is an amazing laboratory for research and doing this. And if you want to figure out about sustainability on Earth, when you build spacecraft and you figure out colonies and you figure out these challenges, you learn about a lot of what we learned in how to keep our astronauts alive to help us understand very small ecosystems, sustainability, things like this. The trade-offs from these are way better than building big sports stadiums or NASCAR or lipstick or having Halloween. We could cancel Halloween and provide enough food for everybody in the world or whatever. But nobody talks about that because we get those things and why they're important to us. The things it's hard for us to see, like, why is space important to me? And I'm not going to make an argument about well, NASA invented Velcro, stuff like that. But there's 1,000 little things that happen from this. And anytime we have a new place in which we can research, those benefits affect us all. And I think, be amazing. So we forgot to mention the passing of another big advocate for space, brain research, computing research, a really amazing person in his own right was Paul Allen. So Paul Allen passed away 2 weeks ago, who was one of the founders of Microsoft. And, he was a guy who was brilliant, very, very brilliant. You read the early history of him and his, one of these people, pioneers of computing and, very, very talented person in many ways who happened to be at the right time, the right place, perhaps for the right, boom. But he was a guy that contributed to a lot of other things. And one of the companies he's founded is Stratolaunch, which that's the company that wants to build the largest airplane ever to launch rockets from, because there's kind of two solutions out there. One is using boosters like SpaceX and Blue Origin does, which, allow you to get in a really high altitude and then you bring the booster back down to the launch pad. Stratolaunch is saying, well, we want to use a spacecraft and we want to put the rocket into use an airplane, get the airplane to a really high altitude and let the rocket take off from there. The advantage of that is you can launch your rockets from a lot different places than just launch facilities. You can launch your rockets from long runways and you can put those runways anywhere. And you can also insert your rockets into very different orbital configurations because you can point them whatever direction you want. You can do a lot. There is a lot of value to this. And they originally were partnering with SpaceX, or SpaceX was going to put like a Falcon rocket underneath it. That stopped, I think, because SpaceX decided they wanted to focus just on booster launch. But Stratolaunch is still going strong. And just a few days ago, last week, they did the first test of the Stratolaunch, of the higher speed test of the taxiing the airplane down the runway. And, it held up remarkably. And so they're building up, they're getting ready to have this airplane take off.
It's really an extraordinary design. I guess I wasn't really dialed in on this project because I feel like I'm seeing it for the first time. It looks like just two 777s with the wings fused in between, 6 engines across. It's really extraordinarily looking.
Yeah. Yeah, this thing's huge. So, and it's I think they're working with, I think Virgin Galactic, I want to say, with our I forget who the rocket partner they're going to be working with is. I hope Stratolaunch continues doing what they're doing. I think there's a use for this, and things like this. NASA was never going to be able to get Congress to give them the money to build something at this scale. Nobody's able to do this, and thanks to Paul Allen for doing this. Thanks to Jeff Bezos, who's spending he's if we're going to have a future in space, it's going to be because of these different people who are trying different programs. And what Brian's point earlier about let's go experiment and do stuff, even if there's a failure, and it's great that these guys are using their private wealth for doing it. And I think the value from these way, outweigh what other things we consider to be very good, some of Virgin Galactic are somewhat completely independent. Yes, but I'm trying to remember. I think there's a partnership agreement. I want to say I'm trying to remember who it is that is going to build the rocket that's going to go with it. It might be ULA or whatever, but Stratolaunch has basically tried to partner with other organizations to be able to go do that. Virgin Galactic, as you know, is Richard Branson and others involved with that, and that was basically using the technology behind the spaceship or Spaceship One, which was the X Prize winner, which was the very, very brilliant sort of design for that. So,
by the way, one footnote on Paul Allen, just because it really struck me because of the timing. He obviously succumbed to cancer, but he was initially diagnosed with cancer in 1983. That was the year I was born, which forced his resignation from Microsoft, and the life he led in that intervening 35 years was just remarkable and amazing, and a figure I think deserving of more attention, specifically now that we know that he is no longer with us, and we can kind of revere him in another context. But just an amazing guy, and apparently can shred like Jimi Hendrix. There's video.
Yeah. Oh, there's just an update. We actually covered this on the show, which was they had tried partnering with some other companies, but then ultimately they decided to build their own vehicles, including they have a manifest, the Pegasus, a medium launch vehicle, a medium launch heavy, and then a space plane that they want to build. And so the Stratolaunch is planning to build their own to do this. So, they have a several year time frame to doing that. So, and then it's Virgin Orbit that was the separate company that's working with Virgin Galactic. So, exciting times. On that note, any picks?
Yeah. I'm reading your BFF's new book, Jojo Hate, or Height. I forgot who the co-author is, but it's The Coddling of the American Mind. And I am so glad that I read The Righteous Mind first, so that I know a bit about how he writes and where he's coming from. But it makes the case that it starts with a very good example that rings close to home for me personally, because we have two kids who have anaphylactic food allergies. And by the numbers, I think he said, and these numbers will be wrong because I can't remember anything, that in the early 1990s, I believe, the odds of a peanut allergy were roughly 4 in 1,000 or whatever. At which point, in a good-natured or a well-intentioned effort to make it easier for everyone else, a lot of preschools said no nuts, no nuts, no nuts. And he attended the orientation, and he raised his hand. He was like, "Hey, it'd be really helpful if we knew. Does anybody here have a nut allergy, or is anybody allergic to peanuts?" And it was just like no, that doesn't matter, no nuts. And then here we are, 20, 30 years later, and the allergy rate has quintupled, like 500% more. And now the best thinking is expose your kids, if you're able to peanut, puffed popcorn, basically, so that you can, get them used to it, because absent ever having encountered peanuts, your body doesn't build up any defense for that. And so then, and this is, that's, as the parents of kids, it's weird to sort of be a statistical footnote in that story, in that, depending on the severity of the allergies, I think one of our children would have been severely allergic regardless, but the other one is a much more mild allergy, and it makes me wonder if we're not a bit of a collateral damage in that. And then they extend the idea to how well-intentioned policies on university campuses do things like try to protect people from being uncomfortable with by exposure to things that trigger negative images or whatever. Specifically, that is the exact opposite advice of what full-time professional therapists give to people who have PTSD. They say, no, you absolutely must. What you do is first, if you have a significant event, first we're just going to talk about it. And so you're going to build up the strength to be able to talk about it in the abstract. And then we're going to start looking at pictures of it. And then we're going to put you in situations that are close to it. And it's like a muscle you build up. He talks a lot about Nassim Taleb's book, Anti-Fragile, and that whole concept that there are complex systems like your bones or your muscles that are, it's not that they're fragile and they could break, and it's not that they're robust in that you can slam them and they bounce around. They're anti-fragile in that the more trauma or the more, we'll say minor trauma or whatever, the more they're banged around, the stronger they get. And that's why we go to the gym to work out, and we increase the weight so that we can get stronger and stronger and so on. And I love the book Anti-Fragile. I would say read Anti-Fragile before you read The Coddling of the American Mind, so it doesn't sound like they're citing voodoo. But I'm about halfway through it, and it talks a lot about some of the high-profile stories we've heard of campus revolts and this war of ideas over the last couple of years. It's really interesting stuff.
It's frustrating because it's like, here in where I live in Burbank, they did the plastic bag ban, right? Gotta get rid of plastic bags. So, the ocean's filled with plastic, and it's like, okay, break that down. We find out 90% of the plastic in the oceans comes from basically a couple rivers in Africa and China. Our water system here, I don't know. I'm inland. I've asked her, how would a plastic bag I buy in Burbank make its way into the ocean? Like, well, the storm drains or this, and it's like, no, we have a problem of plastic in the ocean, which is true. And then we have these plastic bags here. In cities where they ban plastic bags, there is statistical evidence you have an increase in foodborne illnesses because now people have to use the reusable bags, which if you keep putting fruit and things like this inside of out there, you have a higher incidence of bacteria and other, these pathogens. They go, well, you're supposed to wash them out. Okay, so I'm supposed to use water and soap and put that into the ecosystem, and they're bad. I mean, the ban on these is bad for humans. It's bad on it for humans, and there's no effect that it does anything to help the environment. And then we move to straws. Now we're trying to get rid of straws. Well, straws did a couple things. One of them is they help prevent tooth decay. If you're using a straw, you're getting less sugar or whatever you're doing going through your front of your dentin of your teeth. And now we're trying to do this because, well, we found a sea turtle with a plastic straw up its nose, and that's the frustrating thing is that you can't, you don't get to bring up the science now because you're not supposed to. And my arguments against these things may be wrong, but there's no room for debate, and you've seen, the peanut allergy is a great example of one of these things where there may be more children have died now because we did this leap to let's get rid of all nuts without thinking through. Well, there's a lot of evidence like kids who raised on the farm have fewer allergies.
I would hesitate to, thinking through implies that it was possible to see all this. There's been a significant amount of data that has surfaced, and we've learned new things since then. It's the crime wouldn't be not knowing what the effect would be. The crime would be to stick to a bad policy after you have the data to show that you don't want to do that.
Or I mean, I would say that there's been a lot of the research as far as how we develop our resistance to things was there before a lot of these places started banning peanuts. That was there before. And there were people who've been worried about, we've known about farm kids have fewer allergies than city kids, and farm kids are exposed to everything. And the idea of let's completely eliminate exposures. I understand the intention, but the fact that the misapplication of the precautionary principle, and that's my frustration there, is we're still banning, where cities are still now moving to ban plastic bags and straws. They're like, wait, no, this is what the science says. Nobody wants to listen to the science because they're already,
I guess this is the eternal optimist in me, is that I hear all that and I'm like, yeah, no, that is a bummer, but those are great natural experiments for economists. Like there's going to be really good data that comes as a result of each of these things.
And I get frustrated. You walk into a bathroom and there are no paper towels because the environmental.
Oh no, I lose my mind over that, dude. Like disease spraying, garbage factories. Oh my god! Like at some point I heard by a hand washing expert on, I want to say like Good Morning America, this must have been 20 years ago, that just wiping your hands on a paper towel gets you most of the way to clean. Like you can get, I think she said 90%. I don't know if that's true or not, but like just wiping on the most important part of the entire thing is the paper towel.
Yeah, and now you have bathrooms that you have to grab the door handle to leave, and it's like, great, I just washed my hands. The guy that left 10 seconds before me, I heard this horrible sound coming from the John, and he just went straight to the door and grabbed that handle. I've got to grab that handle now. I've got to grab this handle. What did your air dryer do? Nothing. It's like I get frustrated, no paper. Like, how am I supposed to? Like, I'm not like Mr. Fussy. Oh, no germs. It's like it's science. It's science. But anyhow.
Anyway,
sounds
really,
great.
I'm really enjoying it. It's even if it's a wonderful lens to view everything through, and you learn a bit about CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. You learn a bit about anti-fragility. It's fun. I'm like 3 or 4 years into my quest to just constantly be reading nonfiction books, and it's so fun when you to hear one book quoting another book. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I read that one, read that other one. Oh no, that's a good way to combine those two, and so on.
Yeah. I got a recommendation I'll give to you later from Jack Horner, dinosaur guy. I ran into him Saturday, and he mentioned a book he was very keen on.
This is in between hanging out with JoJo.
Yeah, if you run into JoJo and you bring up my name and he pretends like, it's just a game we play, just a game. So,
classic JoJo.
Yeah. Justin?
I've started watching a show that Brian has been very eager for me to watch because we both very much enjoy it, and it is Preacher from AMC. I am, I think, 6 or 7 episodes in. It continues to be one of my favorite shows on television. Not only, and it's just so fantastic that we get to have one of my favorite comics adapted as faithfully in its tone and not necessarily in its story. But man, is it just one of those shows where there's never a moment when you turn around the corner that what you find is not more colorful, creative, and inventive than you were expecting it. It is a show that hangs its hat on its ability to continue to surprise you in, and obviously, look, it is a show that delights in how far it can go. It amazes me that it's now 3 seasons in, and the way that they take Catholic the world of the Bible and make it their science fantasy playground with just these characters being tossed around all willy-nilly in crazy ways. Like, man, it is amazing that it has not been protested or picketed, but I am glad that it continues to exist for those that enjoy it.
When you say 6 episodes in, you're talking about of the 3rd season or 2nd season?
Oh, third season.
Third season, yeah.
The most recent season. I'm now catching up on the most recent season. But this season finds, and look, this is kind of the blessing and the curse of the television version is that the show is the comic was very much an on the road story. So it's like every different town, different characters, different adventures. This the show tends to kind of stick the characters, our central 3 characters, in different settings, many of which echo the biggest moments of the comic book. But this season brings us back to a little bit of Jesse Custer's backstory, our main character. And man, it's just one of those things where you look at other shows that, and maybe Lost was kind of the breaking point on this in television, where the flashback became this thing that you dreaded, where it was like, oh God, like everything doesn't need to be explained. Like why do we have to string out like, oh, how are we going to make them finding this bullfrog a whole episode? Oh, because we're going to spend half the episode in this dumb backstory about how somebody was really sleeping with the girl at Starbucks until they found out that she was actually a spy or something. Like, it was just some dumb little bottle episode, but you don't want to do a bottle episode, so you call it a backstory. And Preacher is a show where, granted, you can go a lot more places when the place you're at is a house of magic and voodoo, but there's just so much fun in what they're building up, and it just shows you why, like, a backstory isn't a problem in writing. Boring backstories are. Backstories that don't connect are, and Preacher is never guilty of that.
Bryce?
I finished Bodyguard last night on Netflix. I think Brian maybe recommended this last week. It's only 6 episodes, but man, it's a real good action thriller about a former soldier with PTSD turned bodyguard of a very what would they call her? A ambitious
of
politician.
the walking embodiment of everything he hated about the politicians who put him in the war.
Yeah. This was the pick last time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
And so I finally finished. Did you get to finish it?
No,
Brian?
I didn't. Between production and everything, it didn't happen. The big problem is it's good enough that now it's on the can't watch without Bonnie list, and then that changes everything. It changes everything.
Cool. The last episode is like extra long. It's like 78 minutes or something. But man, a lot of good tension, and it all wraps up in there's a point like in the 4th or 5th episode where you're like, oh, okay, well, big things have stopped happening, so we're just going to be focusing on this one thing for a while. But the last episode really like pulls it all together, gets everything sorted out. The high tension, things are going back and forth. It's really good. That's Bodyguard on Netflix. Though I think it's on the iPlayer if you're in England.
Yeah, it was originally a BBC production.
Right.
Just a funny little button to Justin's comment about flashbacks. The one that broke everybody for Lost and like the bottle stories that went nowhere was, remember Nikki and Paulo in Lost?
Sure.
The couple, we had no idea who they were or whatever.
Oh yeah, we started to develop it, and then suddenly they're just they're dead or paralyzed and just die there. And
that was their solution after realizing this was a horrifying mistake.
So you know what you've seen Paulo in more recently?
Well, I know he was Xerxes in 300.
Another show that's known for its flashbacks and way out of sequence, Westworld, Hector Escaton.
Oh, yes.
Bad boy, the bad boy cowboy. That's him.
Yes.
Wow.
Good thing he didn't learn his lesson because it worked out really well for him.
It did.
No more flashback shows. We have the script from HBO. Oh, no.
He says, no. And they're like, have you seen the costume you get to wear? And you're like, all right.
I see.
So I have a pick. First off, I'm going to say, like, I've got the AMC, whatever their version of the Movie Pass thing is. That's the $20 a month. You can see like 3 or 4 movies a week.
By the way, they love that you call it
because you use the app. What's that?
They love that you call it that. They hope everyone refers to it as the AMC, whatever, like Movie Pass thing.
but real. 3 movies a week. They in any format, anything you want. There are no restrictions on it. They just announced they have 500,000 subscribers to it. Wow. So, and I use it because sometimes there's a movie. It's like, I don't know. All right, I'll go see it. And I saw Halloween before, which I really dug, and then last night I was like, man, I don't know. My girlfriend really wanted to see it. I'm like, I don't know if it's gonna be good. The critics trashed it, whatever. Let me go see. And I went and saw Bohemian Rhapsody. And I would say that there are, from my critical point of view, suffers a lot of biopic flaws. There's a lot of the tropes and stuff you're going to see. And this was also a movie that was, Brian May is one of the producers of it, one of the founding members of Queen. So you know that it's going to be, you're going to get a little dirt, but not a lot of dirt, because it's, basically made by the people who it's about. So, well, with the exception of Freddie Mercury. And I got to tell you that I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. And it was, one, people have accused it like, like one description, like, oh, they wrapped it in bubble wrap and sort of, it's superficial and it doesn't get to this. And I thought about this, like, some biopics are designed, almost feel like they're designed to make you not like the person that you look up to, know. And I would say this is this is certainly, this is the Disney version, I guess. Not say that like I'm gonna get into, Freddie Mercury's personal life, sex life, all of this sort of stuff. I mean, is Disney and sort of like, let's create a simple version of the story. Let's get rid of contradictory things. We're going to consolidate characters into people that didn't exist. We're going to do things just to tell you this sort of story, and understand that you're watching a movie that uses the same names and characters as some of the events, but it's not really what happened in that sort of way. But that being said, about the music, about the band, about Freddie Mercury, I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Thought it was really good. And I would say it's kind of like the anti-Steve Jobs movie, where that felt like that was, Sorkin deciding to, you like this guy. Well, let me show you who he really was. Like, you didn't know. I mean, you used a book written by a guy that hastily put it out there. And I'm not any closer to knowing who this guy is. I know what your sock puppet is like. And this is sort of maybe like that, but on the other side of the spectrum. You're going to come out of here, going like, man, Queen was a great band. Freddie Mercury had a great voice. What an interesting life. So.
Well, yeah, and that's look, it's done very well at the box office. It opened 50 million opening weekend, so obviously people have kind of resonated with it, and even some of the critical reviews that I read were very much like, hey, look, at the end of the day, Queen made some really great songs, so it's like, this is just, even if it was a Punch and Judy puppet show that was punctuated by all these Queen songs, you'd probably be, it's going to be a good cable movie, just because it's always a good excuse to listen to a bunch of Queen songs.
Well, it's a movie where you have, if you look at the critics put it, like the Tomatometer put it at 60%. The audience score right now is 95%.
Wow.
It's got a cinema score in it. So the audiences are loving this movie. You compare it to the Steve Jobs movie, where critics loved it, but audiences came out of it like, this isn't what I wanted, and this isn't, I didn't get the story that I wanted. And I think it's a very, everything's going to have its own bias. Everything's going to have its own thing. But if you love Queen and you think Freddie Mercury was an amazing talent, go see this movie. You're not going to hear anything you didn't already know before.
Yeah,
you're going to see a great story. A great story presented in a pretty good way.
And Rami Malek credible as Freddie.
Oh, he's great. But I would say that like the big surprise is John Deacon is played by Joseph Mazzello.
I don't know who that is.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, okay.
Kid from Jurassic Park.
Oh, wait, the little kid?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Kid from Jurassic Park.
Wow.
So he plays John Deacon, who is the very reclusive member of Queen, who has pretty much, after Freddie Mercury passed away, pretty much almost all but stopped performing. Still involved with Queen behind the scenes, but he's just, a very, very reclusive person. But so that was Joseph Mazzello playing him. But yeah, Rami Malek's great. The charisma that he had, you're like, this is just, I'm like so glad they didn't do the Sacha Baron Cohen version. He was at one time was going to play him, and I think that this was Rami Malek. Just, I feel bad because the controversy behind the scenes between, Singer leaving the project, still getting director's credit, everything else like this. The climate in the town around him, I hope it doesn't affect, Rami Malek when it comes to award season, whatever, because I thought he did an amazing job.
Wow.
Well, and look, people love biopics. There's a reason why it had that Oscar run for a while, where with like Ray and Walk the Line and everything, it's a crowd pleasing a crowd pleasing genre, and
yeah.
You mean the movies about how entertainers are important, and it's important that entertainers entertain?
Well, but yes, and at least those are the musician ones, and not, they don't go fully up their butt with the like, oh,
With
what
the
a great actress,
acting,
or
yeah,
what a
of
great
course.
actor somebody was, or what a great director somebody was. Like
Right.
that's what, or it's just how great LA is. You can always count for at least 2 out of the 10 Best Picture movies about how great LA is.
It's amazing. Guess that's it, gentlemen. We've just got a interplanetary object in our solar system that may be of alien origin.
No NBD. We also talked about movies. That was fun.
True that. Go to the theaters, enjoy movies while you can. Hold your family close. Until the next episode of Weird Things. It's been weird.
Cool.
Yeah.
Hey, good show.
Good
All
job,
right,
people.
you guys need a minute?
Yeah, I'm going to turn off the fan, and also just remember that I tend to have a heart out to go pick the kids up at the bus, but we went pretty quickly today, so there should be plenty of room to play.
What is that time?
Yeah, just before 3:40, I got to be down there.
Okay.
So I think we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Everyone's like, all right. Well, hi everybody. I think this was my pick last week, but I finished playing Return of the Obra Dinn, the murder mystery / insurance adjusting mystery from Lucas Pope. Man, that's a really good game and a really novel way to tell. I keep calling it a murder mystery because you're trying to figure out how this entire crew, how each individual person perished. But murder is maybe not exactly the right term for it. But it's really good, and like the setting and the concept really work with how kind of frustrating some of it is. If you think of like Papers, Please, right? Like Papers, Please, if you stripped away the aesthetic of it, you could really make that a fast game, right? If you made keyboard shortcuts and you did all this stuff, you could make a fast version of a Papers, Please like game. But part of the tension of Papers, Please is that you really don't have strong control, right? You don't really have like very responsive. You're flipping through books, you're checking all this stuff, and you're kind of wanting to do your job because part of the game is you and your family's survival. And so Return of the Obra Dinn has some of that stuff, and it's just like there's not like a fast travel, and when you're first going through the death moments of each corpse, you're kind of it's kind of slow. You're kind of like, okay, I'm seeing the moment, I'm seeing the people here, but I can't really do anything until the scene closes in first, and then it shows me the book, and then it goes back into the scene, then I can leave. Little things like that, but also like it takes place in 1807, and it uses a magical stopwatch, and you're writing in like the frustrating parts of it also feel like feel right. So I have heard of The Quiet Man. I have not played it because I don't like throwing all of my money away. But it looks bad, and I don't necessarily want to spend any more time with it than I would have to.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry?
Should I not ask what it was, or
A video game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I
can.
What's funny is like by virtue of being older, I walked in and I hear looks bad. I don't know how much time I want to spend on it. I was like, oh shit, is somebody like seriously ill or?
Oh
like,
no,
like,
no, just some bad video games. Hey, Andrew.
I need a mobile video game recommendation. Like something I can pick up and do for just a couple of minutes and then keep on going.
I have been playing. I actually just started playing this the other night. Golf Battle.
Golf Battle.
Golf Battle.
Golf Battle.
Golf Battle. And
is this the one where it gets? Sorry.
It's a very like short form multiplayer game, and so they have like it's like mini golf, and so you can just play standard like strokes, but there's also rush mode, and so you can take as many strokes as you need, but you want to get through like these 3 or 4 courses as fast as possible.
It's basically like speed running.
Yeah, basically
with golf. That's great.
And it actually feels pretty good. The ads are not too. There are no ads. There are no ads, but it's like a.
They got in-app.
I don't know. I haven't had any ads on it, and there are no timers. But it's like a what's that game? Clash Royale thing where you earn chests, and then you have to wait for the chests to unlock. And if you only have so many slots and your slots are full, then you can play, but you won't earn chests because you're unlocking. It's like a weird semi-organic timer. But also the stakes on the game are not so high that you would ever want to buy any of the purchases anyway. So it's kind of nice. I don't know.
Sounds perfect.
So, a report from the Wall Street Journal: Amazon will possibly split its HQ2 between two cities, with the two most likely being Crystal City, Virginia, and Austin, Texas.
Oh, seems like now's a really good time to move to Austin.
Splitting it up seems weird.
I mean, it worked out really well in the office when Jim and they were co-managers.
So apparently the worry is that anywhere that they go, they want to make sure that they're near an educational facility, because that's where you likely get the kind of engineering talent that you want for a company like Amazon. But also, they are worried that if they drop another headquarters, that immediately all the problems that they're making another headquarters for follow them to another city. So splitting that up hopefully would basically have them mitigate that a little bit. Although, where is Crystal City, Bryce? I'm not as familiar with Virginia.
I don't know it specifically, but my understanding is it is near DC.
So yeah, so dropping a gigantic population bomb and traffic snarl into Austin and DC, having driven in both Austin and DC.
Yeah, it's in Arlington. So
oh Jesus Christ,
it's fucking right there.
oh, Jesus Christ.
Right next to the Pentagon.
Who boy.
Next to Reagan International Airport.
So, there you go.
There you go.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Should we?
Yeah, say part of this too. It's like, we can't reiterate enough. When you think of Amazon, as we think of the company that brings the stuff to our door, but the biggest growing part of it's the data, it's the AWS, it's logistics, it's every time you look at an article or something, anytime you interact with the web, you see an image or something. Somewhere, a fraction of a cent is going into Amazon's account because it came from an S3 server, more than likely.
I mean, yeah. Amazon's S3 was them deciding, I want to get into the cement game for the next several hundred years. Imagine everything that you know in the world that is made with cement, and that is what Amazon S3 is to the web.
Yeah.
All right, you guys ready to do after things?
Hells
Yep.
yeah.
All right, then, Andrew, you can take it away in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome to After Things, the show that comes after weird things. I'm Andrew Main. I'm joined by Justin Robert Young,
Well, hello, friends.
Brian Brushwood,
Howdy, howdy.
and our totally not mediocre producer, Bryce Castillo.
Doesn't have the same ring, does
That's
it?
loaded.
Super producer
But totally
extraordinaire.
not mediocre.
I mean,
Loaded term.
technically they're the same thing, right? But
An
one of them
hour
just
ago, I was
rings-
Mr. Awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
It doesn't, in a Venn diagram of Mr. Awesome and totally not mediocre, it like intersects.
Yeah, I was about to say, Mr. Awesome is most certainly not mediocre,
You know what it is?
so
It's
it's the
totally.
same thing.
It's the totally that is.
well, I mean, would you like to be partially not mediocre or
I like-
totally not mediocre?
Just not mediocre. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
He's in his
Oh,
bubble.
rethinking that intro, Bryce. Not in the way that you hope. I would say that between the four of us here, we all read a lot, in varying amounts. I would say that probably Brian and Justin probably read the most. I don't know who reads more between the two of them, but I know you guys on your choo-choo train of books.
They love their Audible.
It goes around the classroom.
I don't totally follow that metaphor, but I'm all aboard.
Didn't you, when you're a kid, like in the classroom and you read a book, did you ever do the train thing? Each time you read a book, you got like a little caboose or a little train car on your train?
That doesn't feel like a universal experience, Andrew.
Not what?
I mean, no, Andrew.
Well, maybe
we
we
all
should start that,
remember
guys.
when that
I'm
happened,
gonna start
right?
building choo-choo trains for you right now on the wall.
When the choo-choo train got very long, because we all read a lot of books.
all read a lot of
remember?
books.
Yeah.
All right, anyhow, my point is,
Throw another book in the furnace. This choo-choo train's going fast.
The train
No,
runs
we
on books.
Fahrenheit
we don't do
450
that.
train.
how did they measure how many books you read when you were a kid? In class, did they care?
We had we had
yeah, I don't know, man.
Star. I don't know if we had, it was like a quizzing program. So like if you read a book, you'd go on the computer and you would do the STAR test to make sure you read the book. And if you read it, you would get points that you could use at the Scholastic book fair. For, like, free books
yeah,
or
I think there was something like that. I was never a great reader as a student though, so maybe I've blocked out this whatever system was in place for me. I've blocked out most of my reading. Came as I got a little older in life. Most of my elementary school reading was all just checking out the same 4 compilations that Marvel made with origin stories for various superheroes. I would just continue. I just check them out and read them over and over and over and over.
I remember being in 9th grade, and our English teacher had a policy where for every book you read, you didn't have to do a report or anything. Like you just had to credibly say, I read this book, and then, have a conversation enough to, believe you.
Yeah.
And then you got 1 point added to your grade, full stop.
Oh.
And I jokingly said, "Hey, so comic books count?" And to my surprise, and this is an elderly woman, who had been there forever, and she was just like, "You know what? There's some really good comic books out there. I'm going to say yes." And this,
issues or trades?
Well, I'm sure she meant it as graphic novels or trades, or certainly. If you read all of Watchmen, then you deserve the credit for having read a book.
Yeah.
It was great. Like, and then I pressed her on it, and this is like first day of class. I'm like, wait, so if I just read 90 books over the semester, then I don't have to take a single test? And she was like, no, you don't, because if you read 90
Jeez.
books,
you have to go to class.
I'm going to say,
attendance, I'm sure, is
well, oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, you have to be there, but you could just tune out and read 90 books.
Man, I wish I had
and
that
it turns
teacher.
out that I think
that's
she
why
was
they,
right.
I think that's why they changed this to the Scholastic points instead of,
Yeah.
instead of that.
I was at Reason magazine, Reason.org, had their 50th anniversary gala this weekend in Los Angeles. Which if you ever read Reason, I highly recommend it. Reason is, of course, they have their own philosophical and political point of view on stuff, but I would say that they're fun, they're interesting, they have really neat takes on stuff, and it's worth. I'm one of these people. I think you should read every source that you have time for, and I just sort of settled into them because I really like their coverage. I really like the way they handled stuff. So they had their 50th anniversary gala, and it was very, very neat because they had some of the people there from the beginning of Reason and helping shape this organization. And the keynote was from Mitch Daniels, the former governor of Indiana. Very interesting guy. And one of the things he talked about was the 5 books that influenced him the most. And that was, more attuned to that audience. But I thought, that's a neat topic to talk about books that influenced us. And, one of the original people behind Reason, Frank Poole, who used to put the magazine together, talked about how that magazine, working on that, he found himself talking to Robert Heinlein in the 1970s, and Robert Heinlein had every single issue they had ever put out.
Oh,
wow.
wow.
And his wife was like, he doesn't save anything, and Frank was like, this is such a, flattering sort of thing to have this iconic kind of person who's loved what you've done and saved it and whatnot. And you talk about influences, I'm thinking, well, Heinlein was an influence on me, and so I want to talk about books that influenced us.
Man, I'm looking at the guest list, and I'm so upset that I didn't hop on a plane and I thought we were close
40
enough
minutes
friends.
ago, you were saying
would've
how
told
happy
me.
you were not traveling. For
I
the
know,
rest
but
of
I
the
would have
year.
made an exception for this because, like, Virginia Postrel she wrote. You attended one of the Wizard Academy classes where we talked about her book on glamour and praying man.
Brian, you know what this is.
What?
Andrew was all upset that he didn't get invited to Vegas. We were all telling fun Vegas stories. Next thing you know, look who's riding on without his Weird Things pals to the Reason event.
Michael Shermer once told me my magic show was better than Copperfield's, and I don't think he meant it. He softened it.
I saw Michael there, by the way.
I know you did. I'm sure it was great.
Oh, Michael.
I'm sure it was great.
Oh, just me and Mike hanging out.
you
at
and
the
my
gala.
Mike. That's fine. It's great. I'm real thrilled for you. Loved Ron Bailey's book, Rise of the Warrior Cop. It's fine. It's fine that
Books
they were
that
all there.
influenced you, Brian.
Ronald
I
Bailey sat
literally
next to me at
have
lunch,
a
by the way.
list of things to
Ron
do
and I were
before I
sitting next to
die,
us.
and meet John Stossel is on that list. It's fine that John Stossel was at this party.
He was on the
it's
list.
fine.
Well, I asked Nick Gillespie, I said, if this were Scientology, who would be your Tom Cruise, John Stossel or Drew Carey?
You're killing me. You're killing me.
A lot of people say
Mitch
that
Daniels.
Brian would have loved to have been at the Reason.
By the way, Brian, Mitch Daniels, in one of his 5 books, mentioned Virginia Prostrals. I think it was The Future and Its Enemies.
Oh, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that's awesome. I think it's The Power of Glamour. I don't know if I'm getting that right. Virginia Postral's book is really, really good in that there is great artistic power in withholding things. The Power of Glamour is her book. For example, even the cover is an example of it because you can see it's a beautiful woman, but her face is turned away, and in doing so, by withholding the all I want to see is her face, and that's one of the artistic things over at the Wizard Academy they talk a lot about.
So that's one of your most influential books.
No, well, it's sort of baked into the DNA of a lot of what they teach over at Wizard Academy, and she was last year's. So they just did the reunion. She was last year's guest of honor and did a whole presentation. And then I didn't even know that. Like, I only knew her work from Wizard Academy, but then somebody said, "Yeah, she's like an OG. She's Reason royalty." And I was like, "Oh my god!"
Oh, yeah.
And so getting to chat with her was a lot of fun.
Yeah, she's a great intellectual who you don't hear talked enough about, in my opinion, in her thoughts. And just the number of people who cite her is just how her concise way of looking at things, breaking it down, just brilliant. So any other suggestions, any books, things that influenced you?
Sorry, I just want to talk about this party. How great was this
goodness.
party?
Was it a good party though? Like, was it a fun party? Did everybody have a good?
You know, so the evening part it was black tie or 60s attire. So I, of course, went out and got myself like a corduroy shirt, 60s like velour, whatever tuxedo top, and then like a big scarf. You know, I looked like, a 60s porn producer. It was kinda cool.
a Richard Dawson was always rocking the cravat that later became the inspiration for Austin Powers.
Yeah. So like, I don't know that. I'm not a big lobster tail fan. It was pretty good, but I got to say the short rib was fantastic. The short rib was great.
It's fine. We're gonna have our own Reason party with blackjack and
I know.
hookers.
It's just gonna be me doing the John Stossel impression with Brian alone.
And when you see me weeping, it'll be the tears of joy because I'm finally at the better party than the one you went to.
I know.
Oh, goodness.
I know. We're gonna have a mop stood up, and we're gonna call her Catherine Mangu Ward.
She was there. She says hi.
I know.
Oh,
I know.
you son of a beast! Son of a beast!
Yeah. So,
You're killing me.
I actually didn't talk to Catherine. I was just
You and
so
Kat
many
couldn't get FaceTime.
I had a friend that-
one more note just about Reason. If I've always been in love with Reason's tone and style. I think that they, Matt Welch, Nick Gillespie, and Catherine Mangu Ward are some of my favorite political kind of writers that have always understood that you need a kind of style that doesn't necessarily have to totally incinerate your substance, and that it can be flexible and adherent to different ideas. So go give Reason. Don't be like, oh, it's the libertarian thing. Just read the Hit and Run blog. The Hit and Run blog is a great little way to get into that idea of like, oh look, here's this way of thinking.
What I love about the Hit and Run, and also the think pieces are very libertarian-y, but specifically the as a matter of fact, like they just did a video. Is this Gary Johnson's last campaign? He's running as a third party for I think a House seat, and
he actually had a video they sent. He couldn't be there because he's campaigning, but we actually had a video from him saying,
You're killing me. You're killing me. It's great to hear the voice of somebody who doesn't really have a dog in most fights and can, who's very aware of all the political maneuvering, but also, is looking for an outsider perspective. And I don't know, it seems healthy. I think whether you're on the right or on the left, I think it's worth listening to outsider voices.
What I appreciate and it's not like I straight take like, yes, this is right. I wrote an email to Ronald, because he had Bailey, because he had an article a week ago that I said, like, I took issue with. I said that I said, I think you made a logical error here. Whatever. Talk to me. He's like, no, you're right on that point, but the bigger point. I'm like, well, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. Really, they're super accommodating, and you could show up there and say, hey, I'm diametrically opposed to everything you guys think or feel. And they're like, great, let's sit down. Let's have a drink and talk. You will be welcomed. You will be welcomed by these people, and they'll say, let's talk about this. Let's talk about the history. Because the ones that, the people involved, the reason, they know every side. They've read every side of it. They read, I've gone to these little mini conferences where, we sit around reading 19th century socialist literature, just so you understand, the evolution of that. So you understand, not like, ha, 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 look at this. It's like, well, this is the argument they're making. This is what they're trying to address. So I would say the intellectual honesty there is wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, and there's just a curiosity. I think that's the thing that I've always really enjoyed about them is that they have always, to me, had a commitment. And whenever I've been able to see their events, I mean, not this one obviously because I wasn't invited, but in general for recent events, there's always, a thought of like, okay, well, let's not. If the point of view of the entire brand is our ideas have kind of been locked out of the mainstream, then that kind of curiosity sort of bubbles over, I think, into a lot of stuff. It's like, all right, is there another way that we're not thinking about this? Or is there something that we can unite everybody on because nobody would look at this and say that this is not ridiculous. One of my favorite things, I think it was in a Reason magazine, it was like a back page cartoon. There was a visual illustration of all the steps that you would need to take to fire a teacher in New York City. And that is if you find your teacher removes their mask, it's literal Hitler. Hitler's there. You need to get Hitler out. Stop Hitler from teaching your children immediately. And it was the entire back page of, well, first you need to report it, and then you have to have the mandatory 2-month waiting period, and then you have to have the hearing. But the hearing can be delayed as per the union bargaining agreement.
And then you must drown the squirrel. If the squirrel drowns, congratulations, it's a hypothesis. Now we must ask a 3-eyed goat to tap 9 times.
But it's one of those things that I think is indicative of why I very much enjoy Reason, is because it's like, look, this isn't unions are bad. This isn't these school districts are the way to go. It wasn't even, although they do oftentimes land on the side of school choice, this isn't we need to remove all of your kids from public schools immediately. It was, can't we all agree that this is gratuitous? Let's just point out that this is something that could be done better. We can do a better job with this. And that's what I've always appreciated about their thinking. That and that one time that I heard Ron Bailey talk, and he was like, oh no, we should probably start thinking about solving climate change with gigantic reflective satellites that can affect how many UV rays. And it's just one of those thoughts where to me, I'm like, man, why isn't anybody else talking about stuff like this? I'm like, why are we worrying about, how many plastic bags I get to take out of the Whole Foods instead of give me more on this reflective satellites thing.
One of the things they've been involved with in trying to be kind of stepping aside from the politics is, one of the problems we have is we have a public pension crisis facing us. And that is that every city, state, whatever, you have employees, and in part of your, you have these pensions. These people are, contractually promised to get. You go work for the government because, you're supposed to be getting paid a thing. And these are massively underfunded. There's something probably $1 trillion+ or more deficit that they don't have in there. They should have in there now. And there's going to be a big crisis as you have an aging population and there's just not the money to pay for them. And you don't want to have situations like I think it was San Bernardino or places where you tell people, hey, we're not going to give you what we promised, and so Reason has actually worked with some cities and stuff to say, let's help you solve this problem now. Let's help you figure out how to make sure that your employee, the people there that are promised they're going to be taken care of, how do we restructure this sort of stuff? Because, you get people every election's great. Elections are wonderful, but you put a bunch of new people in there who don't understand the problem and who won't be around in 10 years when it starts to bite you in the butt, who make short-term decisions. And we've had California with CalPERS, like you had, 9 people cost $1 trillion deficit because they pegged basically the bonus structure to like the booming stock market, which was dumb. But to their credit, like, they're well-intentioned people. They didn't know any better, but they only spent like 20 minutes listening to a counter argument why to do it. And now here we are, like $1 trillion deficit because it seemed like a good idea at the time. And those things far out anything you think that we lost because of Wall Street, shenanigans, which is a lot.
Yeah.
You put that on a municipal and state level, and it just far outdoes it. So Reason's trying to work with like, hey, how do we stop this problem? It's not a political point of view. It's not saying one side's right or wrong. It's like, we've got economists, we've got people who understand how to structure these things. We've looked at all these other cities that have these problems, and now we think maybe we can help you here, prevent this.
And that is, I think, a general thing that I've always appreciated about Reason is that they tend to look at government not as this like, oh, this thing we need to rail against per se, but just one option in many that we can look at. And I think that's like probably their only like religious thesis is like, let's just consider all options. Can we not start the conversation by fundamentally eliminating 90% of the board and only getting to argue about these two things? Let's, for the sake of intellectual discourse and also, I don't know, the future of our nation and the world, just bandy about these other different ideas that maybe don't fit the orthodoxy of one side or the other.
No. So we live in an age where part of the problem is that no matter what party comes to power, when you're in office, the most power you have is the power to spend. Yeah. And even if you come in there with like, well, I'm going to cut spending, but I'm going to spend it over here though, or I'm going to do this. And that's the challenge we face is that, we're, in any level, it's hard to get elected saying we need to tighten our belts when people want you to loosen them. And, and it's hard to say, well, we're going to cut this program to pay for this other program. Nobody wants to hear that. But anyhow, influential books. One of the things that got me thinking was Robert Heinlein had this interesting evolution where he kind of started off as almost maybe borderline fascist. You read Starship Troopers, whatever, enlistment gives you citizenship, etc. And then he evolved. His thinking really evolved from the 40s to the 50s to the 60s. And then you read, the 60s, the Michael Valentine Smith. What's the name of this?
I don't know.
Oh man, I'm just totally.
But I do. While you look that up, I do think it's fascinating that the only I read bits of the book Starship Troopers, but I only know it by the parody of the idea of enlistment guarantees citizenship and all that stuff. Like, Starship Troopers, the movie, is some of the best satire I've ever seen in my entire life. And I think it's satirizing the book Starship Troopers. It's amazing in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, Stranger in a Strange Land. I can't even believe that just escaped me.
Yes, of course. I have read that one.
Did you have a problem grokking it?
I grokked it, man. This is a book that came out, 1961, and just was sort of at the start of, this big, cultural revolution. And, here's, Heinlein, the guy that wrote, these, Justin and I had a teacher, Mr. Wilkner, who, wonderful teacher, but I would say his political leanings were very different from my own. And I remember I'm sitting in class and I just found out that Robert Heinlein died. And his classroom was next to ours. He's walking through and I look up and I go, Robert Heinlein died. And he goes, good. He was a fascist. And just exited through the door.
Wait, did he not read Stranger in a Strange Land? Wow.
He's Mr. Wilkner. He was a very kind soul, but he was a very blunt human.
Yeah. So I remember that. And that was just it. I'm like, I don't think that's right. I think you're saying that to get a reaction, but what a horrible thing to say to a kid whose hero just died, But he would go on and on about, people who I think are completely, I was still to this day, I think are completely, you know, oh, Neil Postman's latest thing. It's like, oh, please. But anyhow, I thought.
Oh, this is the part of the program where we remind you, beautiful people at home, that sometimes technical things
Accepting people,
happen.
letting people determine what they're going to be. You know,
Hey,
people having their own determination of what they're going to be, and what sexually, freedom, all these sort of things. It's saying you don't just have, you can't, if you're for government limiting itself. Oh, problem.
Yeah, we dropped out there right about when you started this phrase. So if you're able to take it back.
So one of the things that, you know, that I really loved was that through Heinlein, first I get into this sort of rugged individualism, which I kind of like, but also through his sort of expression that it means respecting the rights of others to be very, very different from yourself or whatever. And so I was like probably like the first time, like, you know, when I was a kid, you hear like, oh, they're, you know, gay people. Some might be gay. Some might be gay. They're gay or this or whatever. And you're like, well, that's just different and weird or whatever. And then you read Heinlein where it's sort of like, yeah, some people are this, some people aren't. Why do you care? And it's that, why do you care? I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
It is. I remember reading first of all, Pierce Anthony wrote a lot of books, and some of them were good. But I definitely loved On a Pale Horse and the Incarnations of Immortality series. He had another one, the Adept series, and there's this moment when somebody is like it's a world where you have a person who falls in love with a robot, and then also a magical being that could transform into a unicorn or be a human. And they're falling in, you know, various combinations of falling in love with each other. And there's that moment you're like, you're okay with this robot being in love with and making love to a horse with a unicorn horn, you know, but it's like, but you're going to think, you know, that this lifestyle that exists in reality is weird. And it's like, oh my God. Yeah. It was one of those eye-opening moments for me as well.
Yeah, like in Heinlein, you're reading about, you know, a guy who's lived, you know, longest lived man in the world, and then what's he going to do next? Like, why not live as a woman?
Yeah.
You know, and then you're like, interesting. You're like, yeah. And then you kind of get, you're like, wait, all of a sudden I've just been presented this sort of idea of, you know, transgenderism, the idea of understanding it from the internal point of view. If you said, hey, read a book about, you know, somebody deciding to switch genders or whatever, I'd be like, think you knew. You know, but then you read it from this point of view and you're like, oh, interesting. I see the point here.
Well,
I see this.
And this sort of speaks to, and in fact, I think we're going to recall you guys back right now, but it does speak to me about the role as prognosticators and predictors of the future that the great scientific, the great science fiction writers have adopted over the years. The idea of I don't know, oracles of things to come, especially as so many of the things we read in science fiction turns out to be exactly right down the road. I mean, you know, I remember reading Ender's Game, and here I live in the internet world where, you know, all that sounded like crazy talk. The idea that the family would gather around with everybody reading their virtual up to the minute personalized newspapers, following whatever Medium posts they are super excited about.
It is interesting because you get people who really think about these things deeply, and they sort of see these sort of, you know, trends to where they're going to be, and you kind of go, wow, you know, and sometimes the future happens different ways. But so I liked Heinlein for that approach. I would say a book that I don't know if I recommend it, but man, did it affect me, was Maxwell Maltz's Psycho-Cybernetics. Maxwell Maltz was the physician who learned plastic surgery like after World War I or World War II, and started finding out that you take somebody who had, you know, a woman who had, you know, maybe a funny looking nose, he'd fix her nose, and all of a sudden her self-esteem would change dramatically and she'd become a very positive, outgoing person. Or somebody was a very attractive person who complained about some feature, he could fix that feature, but then they'd come back 6 months later with something else that they felt bad about. And he realized how much our external idea of how we appear affects our personality, our behavior, whatever. And I would say that book helped me a lot with my own self-esteem. You know, reading that as a young man, reading that book and trying to separating my personal, my thoughts of my personal appearance or whatever from my inner point of view of who I was. The time I was a kid, I'd wear glasses. I had this chin quiver that quivered a lot and whatnot. And so, I was very, very, insecure because of these things. And that was a book that made me think about things in a different way. And also, I think he got into a lot of there's also sort of take ownership for yourself, stop blaming other people, looking for external things. And that's a problem now, is because, there's an ideology out there that, it says, hey, part of the problem is because of everybody else. And often people deal with adversities and stuff. These things are real. But if you tell people the only solution is get rid of the adversity at some point and then you'll be fine, that'll never work.
Yeah, that's a wild one. I remember seeing Psycho-Cybernetics on the bookshelf of my parents' library, as it was, and all of a sudden I feel bad that it's a book that they've read and I haven't, and I guess that one will be next on the list if there's an audiobook.
I don't know how well it holds up at all. I really don't know. I remember at the time with some of these things that I read that I'm like, this made an impact. And I had a discussion with a friend of mine once about, he went to one of the Werner Erhard seminars, EST, which is, it's controversial self-help or large group awareness things where, they kind of, you go inside there for 3 days and, then they make you heavily recruit other people. So it's sketchy as all hell. And my friend said, yeah, I went to one. So it's great. Made me, he said, the realization I had would seem trivial to you, but for him, it was basically take responsibility, forgive everybody, take responsibility for your own actions and just move on. And that's just, it's a powerful sort of thing. We can live in perpetual sense, perceiving ourselves as victims, but then you never move on.
So man, it's interesting because you've picked an interesting vector, because a lot of the formative books I read when I was young were all fiction, specifically, I guess fantasy and science fiction. And it's interesting how many ideas percolate down through that modality that have a profound impact. And it's like, I would never read a nonfiction book when I was, 16, 17 years old. And yet a bunch of the important ideas that was being bandied about in nonfiction books show up in there. Yeah, I guess
I got one. I got
Okay.
a fiction book that I was really not a gigantic reader when I was a kid, and even growing up, I was so much more of a news hound. I was obsessive about newspapers and magazines and stuff like that. But I wasn't really a tremendous book reader. The one book I will say that has stuck with me probably more than any other is the Watchmen, which is now a graphic novel, was a comic series. Just the lesson, the moral of that story, specifically Adrian Veidt and Dr. Manhattan, told me more about my own anxiety, about my how much the world is uncontrollable, how much, even this obviously this is an outsized mythic tale of superheroes, but spoiler alert for anybody who has listened to or hasn't read The Watchmen, Adrian Veidt has a plan to save the world, and does. And in his moment, he knows that there's only one person on the planet that he can look in the eye and have tell him that he saved the world. And the answer that Dr. Manhattan has for Adrian Veidt is that, nothing ends, nothing ever ends. And the idea that, okay, best laid plans and all the moral compromises that could go behind it, right? This is a story about how on however you want to see it. Either this was the greatest, most heroic act in the history of the planet on a long enough timeline, only for him to realize in the final moment that he wasn't looking at a long enough timeline, right? And him, just the questions and the thoughts that you grapple with that, and then take that as the micro of how much do we care about the plans that we make and the moral compromises that we make, and what if we now think about that on an infinite timeline? What if we now think about that as it's not about what it's going to be for tomorrow, what it's going to be for next month, what it's going to be for next year, what it's going to be for the next 10 years, but what if you think about it as no, I'm making these decisions in infinite space, and now they have to stand up infinitely. It made me think so much more about my own personal how I process things and how I want to behave than really any other book that I've ever read.
Yeah. I guess this is where I just make a confession. I've probably read 35 to 40 Pierce Anthony books. That's how I spent pretty much 8th grade through 10th grade. Maybe 7th grade. Starting with On a Pale Horse and going from there. Some of his stuff was weird, and I don't know that I'm a better person for having read it. Like he explores in this book Firefly, he explores like this guy's in jail and his only crime is being sexually attracted to young children. And like that's some weird ass shit to read in your sophomore year of college from somebody you've been reading for 4 years. And I'm just like, all right.
What did I set up for here?
Yeah, exactly, right? However, I will say the Incarnations of Immortality series was just such a blast. The idea that there are not quite gods, somewhere in between gods and humans, are folks like death, fate, time, war, and then lesser beings like famine, the Four Horsemen, and so on. And then ultimately the series rounds out with God and the Devil, and all of them represented as offices that you take up. So in the case of On a Pale Horse, it's a world where both magic and technology exist. You might have a digital watch, or you might have a magical sundial on your wrist. And also it just feels late 70s as hell. It's amazing. And dude decides he's going to kill himself, and in walks Death, and in a snap reaction, he fires a shot between the eyes of Death, and Death dies. And then in walks, hi, I'm Fate. I sort of knew this part was coming. I'm here to tell you that you've killed Death, and guess what? You now assume the office. And he takes off, and Death turns out to be a mortal immortal, a person who wears magical technology. And so it's like, here, put on this cloak, and oh, look, now you look like you have a crazy skull face. Take this, here's a switchblade scythe. Here's your horse that is, you press a button and it turns into a Corvette. It's insane and awesome. And then next book is about time, and it's like, oh, you're at the right place at the right time. So the good news is you're now Kronos. You could go anywhere. But the bad news is you are 42 years old. You will live exactly 42 more years, and then you will die. And then because you will live, also you're going to live backwards. So everything you remember is stuff that hasn't happened to everybody you encounter. It's a real trip. It was a fun series. Got a little sloppy at the end, but I liked it.
In the Parable story, we've mentioned this before, probably several times, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Richest Man of Babylon.
Oh, most important book I've read. I mean, life changing, literally life changing, and I feel like we've hammered on that a lot, though.
I agree, but there's always new people too here, and just there's the person going, but really, it's and I'll say this again, the lesson they talk about, the parable of throwing the stone from the bridge, is just the idea of like how it's a wonderful lesson that we've now learned later on, and human psychology and what forms patterns and behavior and whatnot. And the idea is that if you commit yourself to do a thing, basically do the thing. Don't make excuses. Don't say, well, I'll do twice the effort tomorrow. I'll do this or whatever. I'll make up for it. You won't. Just understanding the power of commitment. And that was trying to think of one of the other books. It was what is the greatest sales? What was it? Trying to think of another one. That there was another one. I'll get to the point of that.
The Greatest Secret from Earl Nightingale.
No, not that. Let me look this up.
But in the meantime, I'll mention one of the beauties of The Richest Man of Babylon is that it's not about. Nowadays, you buy a book on finance, you're going to get a lot of specifics that are relevant to early 21st century, late 20th century, or whatever. The fact that it's set in ancient Babylon and it's up to you to figure out the meaning of the parable, where we're speaking in the simple language of, if I earn 10 gold coins a day and every day I put 10 gold coins into a bucket and only remove 9 by the end of the day, what happens in a month? Oh, I'm overflowing with gold coins. Like, you get the message without needing to get bogged down in any of the specifics.
Yeah. I think maybe it was Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, that got into, like the willpower, just the idea of willpower, what that really means. And there's sort of, it alludes to this, dances around what the point is. And then you kind of realize like, oh, these people who succeeded or whatever, there's a story in there, like, I think it was like the little girl trying to tell, her mom's employer, like, you've got to, you owe her like $4. He's like, I'm not going to give it to you. And then she finally got the $4. And it's like, why did she? Her resolve was greater than his. And that's a critical thing. How do you succeed? If your resolve is greater than the people around you, that's where you succeed.
Yeah, agreed. So how does it work with picks when all we're doing is giving picks?
I think we just say, rewind, suckers.
I would say we just go for one. Pick the one if you said, hey, this is the thing that I think could have the most impact.
If you've not seen it, go watch Gattaca. And I think it's timeless. I think it stands up.
Marge, this isn't Gattaca.
Gattaca had a very important message, and I've quoted it several times in other contexts. But if you don't know what I'm talking about, then watch that movie. It's a great study in as you were just referring to, stoicism, and do the thing. One pebble every day, and you see an example of that where despite tremendous global adversity, somebody does the impossible, and I liked it a lot.
Cool. Justin?
Well, I mean, I would again, Watchmen to me is just such a great. If you have not read it, it's worth reading. If you've only seen the movie, it's worth reading. If you're excited about the HBO series that's coming up, it's worth reading. There's a lot there. Not all of it is, a lot. There's certainly plenty of thrills and chills that are not necessarily the moment or the effect that it had on me when I first read it. But other than that, I don't know about fiction that makes you think about kind of life. I would also say Foundation to me was another one where the idea of, the initial premise of like the science of predictive history and the gigantic scope that story tells, and specifically, probably the great developed into television or movie villain is the mule, and what the mule represents in that story. And this gets back to expectation versus execution, and how much knowing what the future is helpful or not. And if you know what the future is, then does that mean that you change it or you don't?
So Apple is making the Foundation TV series.
Yeah, and I'm pumped. I'm excited for it. I think that it's a very interesting property to make, because those books tend to span like hundreds of years, right? Like in between, and
thousands,
thousands. And even in the books themselves, you are just jumping kind of relentlessly forward in time, no matter how much you care about the characters, which is sort of its charm. But I would wonder whether or not they just stop and linger on some of the more seminal stories that are told in that series.
That one of the things that was in Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster, which is now past the orbit of Mars, was a memory disk with the Foundation books.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
So I think that's great pick. There's like Foundation, and then actually Player of Games, I joke, is sort of like kind of like a nerd Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
You know, you'll hear certain people mention like Player of Games. You're like, yeah, I know.
I liked
talked
it.
about
I liked it quite a bit.
Yeah.
I couldn't describe that. They do a good job of keeping everything abstract to let you know the importance of the game. And for the life of me, I couldn't tell you what it was. You know, and I think that's how it was written. That was fun.
Yeah. Price?
I know we're talking about influential books. I don't quite know if this is it for me, but it is maybe the last very long book I've read in a while, which is Jonathan Franzen's Freedom. It is sort of the decades-long story of this family as they split apart and get back together and kind of deal with everyone's own baggage. I remember when I read it, I think it might have been in this like 1 week period between when I quit my last job and before I was moving out to Austin, and I just like read this over like a week straight. But I really enjoyed that.
Excellent. Yeah, my pick, I'm just going to say that Richest Man in Babylon, you know, it's hokey in many ways, but the messages in there are very interesting. And, you know, it's a book that you talk to other people. I've encountered other people read it and, you know, took it to heart and go, yeah, it was just a really wonderful way of framing things. So I mean, you can get the Kindle version for like 99 cents. I'm sure a PDF's available. Audiobooks like $3. So there you go.
Right on.
It's been after.
Cool. Well, that'll do it, folks.
All right, I'm gonna pick up my girls from the bus.
All right.
Good times, man. Good chats.
Yeah, man.
Good times, everybody. All right. Awesome possum. See y'all later.
Later.
I'm gonna put a little music on because there we go. All right, hey everybody, good shows. We will see you back in a couple hours for Cord Killers. Bye.